Welcome to the Chess Angle. This is not your typical chess podcast. If you're an amateur or club-level player, the Chess Angle is for you. Our content is aimed at busy adults who are serious about the game but have limited study time. Featured guests include both amateur and titled players alike. And now, here's your host, Director of the Long Island Chess Club, Neil Bellon.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. A quick programming note. I'm tinkering with the music for the podcast. I mean, that's, of course, window dressing, but I'm a musical guy. I like to have music for the ad breaks and the intro and the outro. So even though I use royalty-free music, of course, there were some issues when I uploaded to YouTube, and I don't want to deal with that friction. So just bear with me as I work through this, but I'm hoping to have this settled over the next few episodes. The main theme, of course, is a keeper, but I'll figure out the rest as we go. So last week in the opening, I spoke about attendance at chess clubs, specifically about players showing up late or if they're a no-show. This was a bit earlier, not before the round. This was maybe about a half hour earlier. Someone says, I don't think I can make it, but if I can make it, like, what would my prize eligibility be? And I told him, I'm like, I'm about to run the pairings and start the club. I'm not going to sit here and do math and give you every possible scenario about what your prize would be if you show up. It's like either show up or don't show up. Like, do you need why are you saying you need a buy, but then, but what would I win if I show up? Like, I was very confused. Don't get me wrong. This guy's a friend of mine. He's really cool. I'm just kind of busting chops here, but I'm like, we're about to start the round. I'm not going to sit here and like give you your own personal projection and trajectory if you win. I go, a lot of people are tied with the same score. I go, it's going to depend on the results from the last round. I can't even come close. There's like a zillion what ifs because a lot of people are in the same score group. So I'm like, I can't deal with this now. I go, you're either going to tell me that you're coming tonight or you're not. And he ended up saying, yeah, well, I really can't make it because I'm in a jam. The rule is also, the U.S. chess rule is that if you drop out of the tournament, if you withdraw, you're not eligible for prizes. But I guess it's amazing how many people get in touch with me, like literally at the last minute. Now, listen, I'm not unreasonable. I totally understand if it's an emergency situation, like God forbid you got into a car accident or there was a family emergency. No, I get that. That's different. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when they do that and it could have been avoided. Or what I've gotten in the past, I'll get an email or something asking about the club. Like, we're about to start the round at 7:30, it's 7:15, and ding, I'll get an email. Oh, I have some questions about the Long Island Chess Club. Okay, that's great. And I will be more than happy to reply to your email, but I'm not doing it 15 minutes before we start the round. It's like, really, that's when you wait to I mean, this is stuff you deal with. This sounds like I'm complaining and whining. I'm really not. I love what I do, but these are things that sometimes get you a little frustrated. But that was just an interesting thing. As such is life at the club level, but it turned out to be a good night. And then what was interesting too, this was the night before July 4th. And of course, here in New York, even though fireworks are illegal, but that's a different story altogether, people start using fireworks like about 2 weeks before the July 4th. You'll start hearing it. And what was funny is towards the end of the night, as some of us were finishing our games, you started to hear like the fireworks outside. And I guess if you had like a winning position and you were about to convert and the fireworks went up, it was like something from a movie or something. But it was kind of cool. We're like playing chess and all of a sudden we hear these fireworks go off. So, the guys got kind of a chuckle from that. And since I'm on the topic, happy July 4th to everyone here in the States. I hope you have a fantastic holiday weekend. And that being said, let's jump into our listener mailbag. So some of you may recognize that was the original theme music to the podcast, which I always liked. A lot of people did too. Short little jazz thing, but I think I might keep that as the new listener mailbag theme. we'll see how it goes. Anyway, our first message is from YouTube. We actually got a few comments on YouTube. This is from our friend Chris. He says, great to have you back. Mondays at work haven't been the same. Great question about the King too. Well, thanks, Chris. Glad to be back. And as always, I really appreciate your support of the pod. Next message, also from YouTube, is from @BombasticElephantastic. That's a great screen name, BombasticElephantastic. He says, finally, in all caps with, I think that's 6 exclamation points. I missed you. I look forward to this 10th season. Amazing. Keep going. Cheers from Switzerland. Well, thank you, and cheers right back to you as well. And our final message from YouTube is from @VC Liburn, they say, what a delightful chess podcast this is, especially for amateurs and those who cannot commit themselves to the endless study of book openings. Depending on what opening 1e6 ultimately transposes into, Black at least has the flexibility to steer the game in a certain direction. Beyond that, you're on your own. So in that regard, it's still very important to have a solid grasp of opening principles, middle game planning, and basic endgame technique. For example, as noted in the podcast, 1 e4 e6, 2 d4 d5 immediately throws you into the French defense, and 1 e4 e6, 2 d4 c5 immediately throws you into the Sicilian defense, possibly even the Khan variation. After 3, knight f3, c takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop c5. So be prepared and expect the unexpected. Well, thanks so much for the comment. And this post was referring to the previous episode about 1 e6 as a universal response for Black against anything White opens with. But I agree very much with what you said. It's very well said, but I liked your second sentence where you say, depending on what opening 1 e6 transposes into, Black has the flexibility to steer the game in a certain direction. I agree with that, and that's one of the things I mentioned. I love the flexibility of 1 e6. It's not as committal as, say, playing d5 after d4. But thanks so much for the comment. I really appreciate it. And our final message this week is from Shannon on our Buy Me a Coffee page. So as a reminder, if you're interested in supporting the show, Buy Me a Coffee is our online support platform. You can buy me a virtual coffee to support the show. So if you're interested, links are in the show notes. And a big thank you to Shannon, who bought 3 coffees. It's greatly appreciated. And she writes, hello, Neil. Greetings from, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Ponchatoula, Louisiana. I'm Shannon, a.k.a. Mostly Alive, on the online chess platforms. I'm a longtime fan of the pod and have listened to every episode. I'm coming off a 7-month break from chess due to a career change. The best part of my return has been catching up on the 25 to 30 episodes I missed. I've spent the last week binging about 4 episodes a day. Your voice has felt like a constant. This made me think about a line from the movie Days of Thunder. Cole Trickle is in the hospital after an accident and nobody's talking to him. Filling him in on his status, he says to the doctor through the intercom, when I'm driving, I've got a guy on the radio who talks to me. That sentiment is one of my biggest takes from your pod. Thank you. I now have your entire catalog on repeat. In all seriousness, the pump I get from listening to your pods drives me to do more, study more, and play more. You've addressed my question to some degree in previous episodes, but I think this subject is deserving of a deep dive, possibly reoccurring. I'd like to start a chess club of my own, and I'm sure many of your listeners do as well. Have you ever thought about a course or how-to on this subject? I'd buy the book and Chessable. I hope you enjoy the coffees while I crack an energy drink. Cheers. I hope you win your next game. Well, thanks so much, Shannon. Incredibly kind words. I'm really flattered that you're enjoying the podcast so much. And now that you mentioned Days of Thunder, Great movie. Of course, I have to watch that now. I'm going to add it to my queue. Great movie, by the way. I haven't seen it in a while. My favorite line is when I think he's in the car driving and he gets bumped and Harry is like, you're wandering all over the place. And Cole goes, yeah, well, this guy just slammed into me. And Robert Duvall says, no, he didn't slam you. He didn't bump you. He didn't nudge you. He rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing. Great line. But thanks for the reminder. I'm definitely going to watch that one. Now, as far as starting a chess club, yes, I have spoken about that in a number of episodes. I don't know if I would do a chessable course. I mean, I think you were just kind of kidding around. The best way, Shannon, honestly, the best way to start a club, it's like any endeavor in life. Just do it. You can just do it. You can learn as you go. You're never going to be fully prepared just from kind of researching it. I mean, that'll help. But if you really want to start a club and it's something you're really into and you think you're going to get a good showing, I would just jump in and do it. I mean, I know getting certified as a tournament director, it would be a club director. I believe that's the first one. You can just kind of jump in and do it. I mean, the hurdles and the hoops aren't that bad. Yeah, I have addressed it previously, but as you say, it is something that I may come back to on the pod. But I don't know. I'll think about what you said about doing something more comprehensive rather than just speaking about it on the pod. But I wish you the best of luck. I think that's awesome. Thanks so much again for the kind words for the coffees. And I'm definitely going to check out Days of Thunder this summer. So thanks for the reminder. So let's get to our main content. And we're going to talk about study plans. This is one of many recurring themes on the podcast. I've spoken about it before. We're going to talk about it now. I'm sure that we'll circle back to it again. And I want to talk about why your study plan isn't working, why you're having trouble boosting your rating, why you're plateauing. It's something we all go through, myself included. We're studying, we're doing everything right, quote unquote. We're doing everything that we're supposed to do. But for many club level players, their tournament results are not commensurate with the amount of study time they're putting in. And I want to explore why that might be, because that can be incredibly frustrating. People don't want to spend time doing something that they care about, and then they're not seeing the results. Many people step away from tournaments for long periods of time because of that frustration. Many people just stop playing in tournaments altogether. Let's kind of explore why that might be. These are just some ideas of my own, just from doing this for many years, things I've noticed, my own experience, anecdotal evidence. I want to start out by referencing a book I just read. It's called Reset: How to Change What's Not Working by Dan Heath. I do enjoy that sort of narrative nonfiction and those productivity books, not the cheesy self-help books, but the more legitimate ones. This book is excellent. I'm going to put a link for it in the show notes if you want to check it out. And it's basically how to fix systems that aren't working. So you want to achieve a goal, or there's a process you need to complete, and you have a certain system in place. Now, he talks mostly about the workplace and groups, but it absolutely can be used for your own personal goals as well. And he does mention that in the book. And I want to read a couple of quotes because this ties directly into chess improvement and study plans that don't seem to be helping. So here's one quote from the book. He says, as Paul Batalden, a healthcare expert, once said, every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets, meaning that once you change your aspiration, when you set your sights on different results, the system you have is wrong by definition, because the system is designed intentionally or not to yield the results you got yesterday. I mean, if you think about that, that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of a philosophical take. Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. So if you have a system that's not working and you're getting poor results, well, it's designed that way. So if you want to get different results, you need to change the system. And then he talks about the dangers of habits and things that we don't even realize are really bad habits. And the quote from the book is, the curse of a bad set of habits is that all the unnecessary things you're doing actually come to seem necessary. And then he talks about how we actually make the change. He refers to leverage points throughout the book. And the quote is, leverage points are interventions where a little bit of effort yields disproportionate returns. Of the universe of things you could do to improve a situation, the leverage points are the things you should do. So that's what we're going to do in this week's episode. We're going to explore these leverage points, so to speak, that can kind of get that boulder moving in the right direction so that we can improve. We're going to explore what might be holding you back. And then the final quote from the book, and to me, this is very powerful. Like when I read this, I actually sat back for a minute. He says, to spark change, we shouldn't think and we should think instead of, because that's what we do with chess players. Well, I'm having trouble with this or that of my results, so we need to do more things. But is that really what you should think? I love what he says. Don't think and think instead of. What can you chop that's not working, and what can you add that is? We need to replace the bad with the good. And I know that there are many studies out there that talk about organizations and workplaces and how they can improve. And what they found was it really wasn't about adding things. It was about removing things that weren't working. But I'm just going to say that quote again because I love it. Don't think and think instead of. So just keep that in mind as we discuss this. So again, the book is Reset, How to Change What's Not Working by Dan Heath. If you're into that type of thing, I do recommend it. Again, I'll link it up. We're going to take a short break and we'll be back in just a moment. And now back to the show. So now let's talk about some general ideas about why your study plan may not be working. And then I'm going to cap this off with one main idea, the most important point for this whole episode, but I'm going to save that till the end. So using Dan Heath's statement that we should think instead of and not and, that leads me to my first point, which is I think many amateur players, they have too much study material. Specifically, they're using too many things at once. They're studying too many things at once. And what happens is they're doing too many things superficially rather than fewer things thoroughly. That's something I've mentioned before. And again, as per above, think instead of, not and. You can't do everything. You simply cannot do everything. Like, for example, for myself, for my study plan right now, for my summer study plan, I'm not playing online at all. Not playing online chess. I'm using the study material and puzzles online. But as far as actually playing online games like my 5-0 Blitz games, which I love, I'm abstaining from that. Anytime I have to work on my game, I'm spending studying, which for me is analyzing my weekly over the board game, which is huge, and then just 2 other things. That's it. I have just 2 other things I'm working on, and obviously analyzing my weekly game, that's not going to be an everyday thing. So it's mostly just going back and forth between these 2 other things, not 3 things or 4 things or 5 things, keeping it simple. And this way I don't get overwhelmed and I'm more likely to do it. But of course, there are people out there, they're buying 5 or 6 books at a clip on Amazon, or they'll drop $200 in one shot buying Chessable courses. All good stuff, but it's really not necessary, or at least it's not necessary to do that all at once. But then what happens is also when you buy too many things, then you start to feel this pressure to use them. And, I got to hurry up and read this book because I want to get to the next one. And you're better off absorbing fewer material more thoroughly than looking through everything just on a surface level, as I just said. Very important. But I think that's a major problem as far as study plans and study material is people are getting overwhelmed because they have too much stuff. And that is difficult to do because nowadays, right, if you're just getting into the game, you want to improve, you want to get better, it is quite overwhelming, the amount of study material. I mean, talk about option paralysis or decision fatigue. It's like, where do you start? You want to study tactics. Well, where should I start? You want to study positional play. The fact that there's so much material is good and bad. It's good because it's out there. You don't have to worry that you can't find anything, but it's difficult in that you don't know where to start. You don't know what to choose. Should I get this? Should I get this? And then what people end up doing is they just get everything, or they just throw their hands up in the air in frustration because they're not sure what to do. But ultimately, You don't want to study too many things at once. That's the main point. The second idea has to do with how you do puzzles or tactical exercises. And many become what I'll nickname a first move Frankie. I'm just sticking with alliteration there. Now, what is a first move Frankie? What they do is whenever there's a puzzle, it could be positional, tactical, whatever it is. And let's say there's 2, 3, or 4 moves of the sequence. They'll only figure out the first move of the sequence and say, okay, I got that one. I got the first move. That's good enough. I'll figure out the rest when I'm actually playing a tournament. No. That's kind of cheating a bit. And it becomes about how many puzzles they can complete and getting that dopamine hit from that, number of puzzles completed award rather than actually understanding the material. Okay, it's kind of like the reason people post on Facebook. I read something that what triggers people psychologically to post on Facebook, what causes like the need or the compulsion to do that is people do it for the likes. Apparently there's studies that show that people do it for the likes. They post and they want to get that validation from the likes. Because think about it. I see people do this all the time. You be at a party and, they take a picture, they post on Facebook, and then they're checking their phone every 10 seconds to see if anybody liked or replied to it. And that becomes their whole evening. I think with chess puzzles, that can be the same thing, especially when you do them online. It becomes how many can I get through rather than how many did I learn thoroughly. But when you're a first move Frankie, you think that just figuring out that first move is enough. And, like I said, that's cheating. You're not really going through that thought process, because if you do try to see it to the end, that's going to transfer into better results when you're actually over the board. The next idea why your study plan may not be working has to do with the transference to over the board play. In other words, what happens is when you're actually in an over the board situation, you're not calculating and thinking in terms of chunks or sequences. Instead, you're thinking in terms of just one move ideas, and you look no further. Well, if I move this, then he might do this. But you got to go deeper than that. You got to look at sequences. You have to calculate. If it's a trade, you have to look at the position after all the trades are done. That's a big, big blind spot for amateurs. Exchange sequences, they can easily make mistakes. In fact, that's where a lot of tactical mistakes happen. In the middle of an exchange sequence, or you think, well, I take your knight and then you take my knight, but then you don't see that, okay, you take his knight, but then he has this in-between move that's going to win material or mate. Like, you have to look at all the ideas and not just think in terms of just one move sequences. The next thing, and this is big, I'm probably going to mention it again later in the podcast, people are not spending enough time reviewing their games. And this is where specific gaps and leaks in your own game are going to stand out. You're not going to see those leaks unless you review your games. And many people play over the board or online, doesn't really matter, but they don't review their games. Or they just look at this one position only. Oh, I know where I went wrong. And they look at this one specific mistake they made. But meanwhile, the rest of the game is extremely instructive and they're neglecting that. Or that one mistake you made was a result of some smaller mistakes that you made earlier, and they're not looking at that thread of the whole game. And one thing I'm noticing, not just from things I see online and anecdotal stuff, but just even people at the club that I speak to, that's a bigger problem than I anticipated. A lot of players, they don't spend enough time reviewing their games, or if they do review their games, they do so on a very cursory level. They'll look at the opening, they'll look at, okay, yeah, on move 12, I, made this mistake that lost a pawn, and that's it, they walk away. That's not enough. You really need to do a deep dive into your games, because that's where you're going to see your flaws. And then when people don't do that, those mistakes just keep happening over and over again, just in different contexts. Next thing I want to mention, and I know I've said this before, they're studying books or courses that are too hard for them, or they're studying out of sequence. That's a big one. And I think the issue is with a lot of players who are getting into this from the 2020 boom with the pandemic and the Queen's Gambit, they're kind of jumping in without any foundation. So they're studying more advanced tactical and attacking sequences, for example, when they haven't even mastered basic tactics first. They haven't mastered the basics of pins, forks, skewers, overloaded piece, removing the defender, things like that. But then they're reading like, The Art of Attack or something like that. I'm just using an example off the top of my head. Or they're studying a book on positional ideas where they're still struggling with the basics of the opening and the middle game. And what happens is when you study material that's too advanced for you without the proper foundation first, it's not going to penetrate. It's not going to absorb. And so you need that foundation. And so people are studying out of sequence or, again, things that are too advanced for them. And that's why their study plan isn't working for them. So that's very important. See, that's something where having a coach, or not necessarily a coach, but just even working with just a more experienced player who can say, you're studying this, you got to learn this first because you're looking at this advanced material and it's obvious you still have basic mistakes that aren't mastered yet. So that's something to think about. Now let's talk about the main reason. This is probably the most important point I'm going to make. The main reason why players are not improving despite having an organized study plan, and this is just my contention here, is that they're focusing too much on the theoretical and not enough on the practical. And this is big. And for over-the-board tournaments, and I guess online as well, mastering the practical is what's going to boost your rating. That's what's going to help you win games. Now, let's define what I mean by the theoretical versus the practical. So the theoretical means the essential chess knowledge and basics required to be a competent player, the board and pieces themselves. For example, this includes, but I'm probably missing a few things, all the basic checkmates, having a solid opening repertoire and understanding the basics of opening play, basic tactical themes, basic middle game and positional ideas, basic endgame themes, etc. And you get the idea. All of the knowledge that has to do with the game itself. Now, the practical, that refers to applying those theoretical ideas in the real world, in an actual live game with tournament conditions. Many people have trouble with this. That's what this episode is all about. They work a lot on the theoretical, but when they sit down at an over-the-board tournament and play a live opponent, which is what it's all about, it doesn't quite come together. It's like the student who studied for the test, is prepared, knows the material, but does poorly on the test because he has trouble taking tests. And successful test taking is not just about how well you know the material, but how much you know about taking a test. And it's the same for chess. Success in chess tournaments is not just about how much chess knowledge you have, but how smart you are and how knowledgeable you are about tournament conditions and playing in a live situation. And many players, they might lack some theoretical knowledge, but they have strong practical skills, which compensates for that. And we'll explore that a little bit now. So the practical generally refers to things that can only be fixed through experience and analyzing your games and can't really be learned or can't really be mastered using books or courses. So if you're looking for sort of a one-sentence TLDR reason why your study plan may not be working, it's for that reason. There are certain things where studying is it's just not going to be thorough enough to fix those problems. There are some things that you really just can't teach. There are some things, it's just the school of hard knocks. You have to go through it. You have to play in tournaments and you have to just have that experience. And that's how you're going to learn these things. And many people, they don't play enough and they're just so focused on the theoretical that the practical side of things is a train wreck for them. And then they wonder why their rating isn't increasing. So again, certain things can only be fixed through experience and analyzing your own games. The books and the courses just aren't going to do it for you, at least not enough. And that's yet another benefit of analyzing your games. I'm always saying that's the most important study tool because those practical things that you keep messing up can cost you lots of rating points over time, dozens or even hundreds of rating points. So you have to analyze your games. What are some of these examples of the practical? So it includes, but is not limited to, the following: nerves and composure. Many people just get very nervous. They can't relax. They become insecure, because it's touch move. Tournament conditions, it changes things. Tournament conditions is a completely different ecosystem from playing on your kitchen table, with Uncle Bill. All right. So many people, the nerves and composure end of it, they have trouble with that. That's going to come from experience, not from reading something in a book. Not rushing and being patient. Another practical skill, clock management, right? Time pressure, poor clock management. That's going to come through experience. I mean, sure, you could read about that in a book like Chess for Tigers, which I think is excellent. I mean, as far as trying to at least improve the practical somewhat through studying, Chess for Tigers would be my recommendation. But again, that comes through experience. But clock management, you need to play through that. Another thing would be confidence and the whole chess psychology thing. Many people just crack under the pressure. They lose confidence. They question their moves. They get intimidated against a higher rated player, or there's just something about their opponent that they find annoying and they let it get into their head and it affects their play. This is stuff that is going to come through experience. The next thing, simple thing but powerful, is blunder checks. Many people will study like a real fancy book, or they'll look at a game of Fischer or something and, I studied this end game, or I studied this game by Petrosian or Tal. It was this big attacking game, whatever it is. And then they go to a tournament and they hang a piece on move 7 because they didn't do a blunder check. So studying a fancy chess book or a fancy course is not going to help if you're making basic tactical mistakes and hanging pieces because you didn't do a blunder check. That is a practical matter. The next thing would be not forcing things. That's a big idea. I see that a lot, where over the board people just want the win. I mean, this kind of goes to impatience that I spoke about a moment ago, but they try too hard to win. That's a good way to describe it. And they don't build up things slowly, which is often what's correct. They try to force the issue, and as a result, they overextend, and then their opponent ends up winning the game. And it's not so much that their opponent won, it's that they lost it for themselves by trying to push things when it wasn't necessary. And that's a big thing with over-the-board play, because you'll see a move. I mean, I go through this too, and okay, like this move looks aggressive and it looks good, but am I forcing things or is it the correct move? And that can be very hard to analyze. You really need to look at that. Sometimes that aggressive move is correct and you're not forcing things. Other times, it's not correct and you are forcing things. And sometimes when you play that forcing move, it could be a 1 question mark mistake and you'll still be okay, or it could be a double question mark blunder. But the idea of not forcing things, that's going to come through experience. And then the last thing I'll mention as far as the practical, even though I'm sure there's other things, players don't think about their opponent's ideas enough. You can't just be an offensive player. You have to look at your opponent's ideas. What are they trying to do? I've won games simply by shutting down my opponent's ideas. They don't know what to do. They get frustrated and then they lash out with some tactical thing that they think they see, but it doesn't work. And then I go on to win the game just because they kind of imploded because I stopped their one idea. But when you play this game, you always have to expect the opponent to play the best move. We're going to take one more quick break and we'll be back in just a moment. And now back to the show. So what does this look like in an actual tournament? Well, I'll give a very, very quick example. Let's say you have 2 adult improvers, 2 adult amateur players, and they're both in the same situation. They have a family, they have a day job, limited study time. Player A spent a lot of time over the past week studying, but he has issues with confidence and clock management, and he just gets very nervous at the board. Player B didn't really study at all that week, but he's just really calm under pressure. He does a blunder check. He never rushes. He doesn't really think about the clock. He takes his time. Well, guess what? Player B probably has a better chance of winning the game, because even though player A did more studying, the practical side, rather than theoretical is very, very weak. And so that's going to negate any possible theoretical advantage he might have over his opponent. And I've seen tons of guys like this at the club where I just know just from talking to them or whatever, they're not really doing much studying. They're maybe looking at a clickbait video on YouTube once in a while, but they're very strong players just because they've mastered the practical side of it. Now, mastering the practical, yes, it does come from experience as well, but it also comes with personality as well. Some people are just more prone to getting nervous than others or getting distracted or are more prone to rushing. As far as confidence in chess psychology, a lot of that I think is innate. I don't want to get too much into human psychology here and all that stuff, but I think you get the idea. Some people are just more prone to being better at the practical than others. But if you are struggling with the practical, you can absolutely work on that. But that's going to come through self-reflection and experience, not buying more study material. But in the example I just gave you, and I see this all the time, the person with more practical skills will often win out over the person who has strong theoretical skills, but is really struggling with the practical. I mean, not always, but it's just a big thing to think about, and I do all the time, about the theoretical versus the practical. Now, the strongest players, and I'm not talking about title players because they're all strong at that level, but at the amateur level, let's say at the below 2200 level, the strongest players are the ones who are good at both. Those are the toughest opponents and the strongest players by far, where their theoretical and their practical are both good. They might not be both equally good, but they're both above average. And I've noticed that at the club, that the strongest players, they clearly have both of those traits. They have all the chess knowledge and all the chess skill, and the practical is there as well. They're patient. They have composure. They won't rush things. They're okay playing like a waiting move or a nothing move if they're not sure what to do rather than force things. And that's the player you want to be. You want to find that balance between the theoretical and practical. And yes, you do need to study. Of course, I'm not being dismissive of study plans, but what I'm saying is you got to look at that practical side as well, which brings me to my last point. This is why my favorite authors are guys like Jeremy Silman, Dan Heisman, and Nate Solon, because they focus so much on the practical aspect of it, the thought process, chess psychology, doing blunder checks. Like someone like Dan Heisman, who's great. We all know National Master Dan Heisman. He's not going to, and this is my interpretation anyway, Dan Heisman isn't really as a teacher like, okay, well, learn this opening or learn this end game. He's more like, okay, you're looking at this position all wrong. The way you're thinking about it is completely wrong. We need to change your thought process because your incorrect thought process is causing you to make the mistakes. Like that type of thing. Like, you're rushing or you didn't look at this exchange sequence thoroughly enough. Jeremy Silman, of course, he's my favorite with The Amateur's Mind and his whole thing. If you read the beginning of The Amateur's Mind, he even says that he has students with decent chess knowledge, but when he saw what their thinking process was, he had no idea that these types of problems existed among amateur players. So you do need to find that balance between playing and studying. I don't think you can just play or just study. You really need to do both. And then you have to find that sweet spot, that balance between the theoretical and the practical, and then you're in good shape. And I mentioned before the book Chess for Tigers, which I think is an essential book on chess psychology. He talks about that a great deal. So I would definitely check out that book and then try to apply it into your own games. Because one of the things he says there is that you just want to get the win. He goes, don't worry about how someone else wins. He just, win in a way that suits your style and make it work for you. So in other words, he says, if you look at a position and you notice that you can win it, but it's going to take a while, but you clearly see the plan, he goes, you're better off doing that and getting the win rather than trying to play another way that's quote unquote quicker and better, but you don't fully understand it. So you're better off winning in 15 moves where you know for sure the plan than trying to win in 8 moves, but you're kind of taking a chance. That's what that book's about if you haven't checked it out already. I'll link that one up as well, in addition to the Reset book by Dan Heath that I mentioned. So those are some ideas to think about, the practical versus the theoretical. A reminder that if you have a question, topic idea, or comment for me, please chime in. You can email directly info@thechessangle.com or click the contact link on our website. I definitely want to hear from you. The mailbag is open. Really appreciate you listening. And as always, I hope you win your next game. Have a great day, everybody.